Hello once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of the internet. I am your host, ZupeMan, and you are watching the ZupePod. Recently, Peter Moore had a chat with computerandvideogames.com, and he had some interesting things to say. If you're unfamiliar with Peter Moore, he is the Chief Operating Officer of Electronic Arts, a company with some pretty great games, but they are often criticized for putting the importance of money ahead of a great product, and rightfully so. At the end of 2013, Battlefield 4 is, in my opinion, a perfect example within the last year that stands out. In short, the launch of that title had been a complete and total disaster, and it took over half a year for them to get the game in acceptable working condition, and yet it still has kinks to be worked out, including the file save corruption issue in the single-player campaign. So anyway, the article in question here begins by saying that EA's COO believes that traditional gamers will take longer to convince that new innovations will be beneficial. On the surface, this is a true enough statement. Of course, that's what public relations chatter is supposed to sound like. It's supposed to lull you into thinking you're hearing the truth when there's a much larger story to tell. But I will entertain this vague concept momentarily just to admit he has a point, even if it is stuck in some warped kind of tunnel vision. Because let's face it, anytime there is any sort of change out there in the world, regardless of whether it's gaming or anywhere else, there's always going to be a vocal faction, a vocal minority that's out there saying, my God, this is the end of the world. This is the end of times. Ooh, booga, 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 the boogeyman's coming. What are we going to do? But just to kind of prove his point a little bit, just from my own perspective, I am a 31-year-old gamer. And even though I've always strived to evolve with technology, I have found myself resisting certain things over the last 5 years or so. Why? Well, it could be that I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this newfangled technology, but I do have reasons to back up why I like what I like and why I couldn't care less for numerous other things. For example, and again, this is outside of the realm of video games a bit, but I'm not a tablet guy, and that's a huge thing right now. Tablets. I'm just not a tablet guy. That's not to say they don't have a place in the world, but they're just not practical for me. When I'm on the go, I hardly ever have the time to watch movies or play games or browse the internet. If I need a vital piece of information, though, my smartphone is more than capable of covering my needs. When I do have the time to browse the web or play games, I'm usually at home, so my PC and home entertainment system do a fantastic job of delivering my needs. If I was a big traveler, I'd probably be singing a different tune, for sure, but I'm not. We all have different needs when it comes to media and features and functionality and all this other stuff, so that's just me. For a dash of contrast, though, as far as the tablet thing goes, I will say that I quite enjoy the lineup of plain Jane e-readers out there. They emulate the paper and ink experience quite well. They resolve bookshelf clutter issues, and on the go, they're far less cumbersome carrying around than a hardcover book. And now they have gentle backlights to make night reading a breeze. Also, I haven't been thrilled with cameras like the connector motion sensing technology controllers like the Wiimotes or PS Move controllers, for example. These tools have also had their place in the world of technology, but they haven't really added anything beneficial enough for me to say, wow, I have to have that stuff. The Kinect 2.0 on the Xbox One is beginning to change my opinion on console cameras, but it's still lacking something big enough to really make me say, I can't live without it. So yes, I've been resistant to certain leaps in technology, but as I said, I have my reasons. Practicality is the primary reason for me to not go one way or the other in regards to certain things. So why do I have such a problem with what Peter Moore had to say if he's kind of sort of right? Well, let's examine what else he had to say, because he's not talking about innovation in video games. Okay? So he says, I think we're going into almost a golden age of gaming, where it doesn't matter where you are, at any time, any place, any price point, any amount of time, there's a game available to you. And our job as a company is to provide those game experiences. And then on our big franchises, tie them all together. So far, so good, Peter Moore. You've got a point there. Times have been changing. There is games out there for everyone. The mobile market is definitely a viable one. It's definitely making some money. It's definitely giving people something to do when they are out and on the go, or they just need a little quick gaming fix when they're not able to sit in front of their TV and play a console game. But here's where things begin to get a little bit troubling. He says, I think the challenge sometimes is that the growth of gaming, there's a core that doesn't quite feel comfortable with that. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Your readers, the industry in particular, I don't get frustrated, but I scratch my head at times and say, look, these are different times. And different times usually evoke different business models. And that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about the video game experiences. He's talking about the business models that people are being resistant to. Different consumers come in, he goes on to say. They've got different expectations. And we can either ignore them or embrace them. And at EA, we've chosen to embrace them. Of course you have! Because it's making you more money. That's the whole problem here. Not so much that you're making money, but the fact that once upon a time, digital content used to almost basically be like a standalone kind of game. Kind of like how the other year Far Cry 3 had Blood Dragon, which was great DLC at a great price. It was its own campaign and totally different than the original game. It was fun, it was funny, it was kind of original in a throwback to the 80s sort of way. It was a blast. But not everything's like that. Everything's all about, well, let's take a look at EA's Titanfall, for example. I have an Xbox One. I picked one up shortly after E3 this year because I said, okay, now is the time. The problem with Titanfall, despite the fact that it's got a lot of really cool elements and that it's a really fun game, is that I didn't feel like when I was playing it that it was worth $60. I felt like content was not great enough to justify that price point, and that they are specifically holding back stuff for us so we can buy the season pass. And that's just it. Instead of providing us $60 worth of content most of the time, for example, let's take a look at the Call of Duty franchise. Call of Duty has made it an art form to pump out this same game year after year after year after year, and in many cases using the same maps, just painting different skins on the buildings or whatever, maybe mirroring, flipping around the map, recycling a lot of buildings or vehicle, designs, and it's just the same thing, just different multiplayer maps for the most part. The campaigns are really, really short, and as a result, most people don't even really feel like playing the single-player campaign is worth their time anymore. And multiplayer over the years has been getting less and less engaging. The maps have been sort of, they haven't really been balanced anymore. Some great ideas, not executed very well, and people are getting sick of paying for the same game year after year. But that doesn't stop companies charging, $50, $60 for a year membership for a season pass or whatever. And that's really what the problem is. People do not like feeling like paying full price for games anymore, and then to get it home and pop it in their console and feel like you're holding back content. People feel like they're getting less content nowadays so that you can gouge them later. That is the problem. And I'm not surprised that EA has decided to embrace this business model change, because that's what it's all about. It's all about money. It's all about money. And, you know, they're out there, and I've said this before, I think, in a different video, but, you know, they're out there and they're saying, well, there's piracy to contend with, and there's GameStop and the used game market, and, you know, yeah, used video games and GameStop are definitely hurting the video game industry, and they are pretty much the reason why we have so much in the way of, you know, pay for DLC and microtransactions. But at the same time, I don't feel like companies are really doing enough to take a look at a game and say, this is worth playing. Let's just throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at these games, and that will make it feel like it's worth the amount of money that we're charging. And no, that's not the fact at all. Once again, I have to bring up Wolfenstein by Machine Games, a company that was bold enough to say, especially after Return the Castle Wolfenstein pretty much changed what multiplayer was like for a lot of people. Multiplayer, I'm sorry, I said multiplayer. They came out and said, no, we're not going to do multiplayer for this game. And everybody was up in arms. They were resistant. Yes, Peter Moore is right in this respect. People were afraid of change. But here's the difference. Machine Games promised everybody we wanted to focus on the single-player campaign so that it was actually really awesome, that everybody would have the best experience imaginable with it. And guess what? They delivered a great game. Reviews have been positive. Word of mouth has been almost nothing but positive. The game's doing well. They're already talking about doing the sequel now. Make a game that people actually want to play. You don't have to throw everything, you know, and the kitchen sink at us in order to make us feel that value proposition. You just don't. You don't have to go through this, you know, holding back content and then putting it in DLC or microtransactions just to make us, you know, pay up more money. That's the problem with the industry. They're saying, oh, people aren't buying enough. Well, how are we going to make up that money? Not, what can we do with the next game in order to make it a better experience so more people actually want to buy the game? Let's make it up by price gouging the people who are actually loyal enough to buy the game and then buy all the DLC. That is the change that you're speaking of, Peter Moore. People are resistant to that, and for good reason. It's bullshit. Flat out, it's bullshit. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about. Peter Moore got me a little riled up this week, and I had to make a video about it. So thanks for watching the ZupePod. Have a great day.